Good afternoon, everybody. Today, we're going to be looking at some practice problems for the ecology unit in living environment. I pulled a bunch of Regents practice problems from the unit, from various homeworks and other old Regents exams, and we're going to be taking a look at as many of those as I can get through in a half hour. Bear in mind, there is a test posted on testwizard.com. It is a timed exam. So once you open it, you will only have a certain amount of time to go through before it is locking you out. You also have a TestWizard homework this week, which is also posted. This one will release its answers as soon as you finish it. So if you want to do it before Sunday so that you get a chance to go over the answers and look it over before taking the test, I gave you that option this time. So this is not an actual class. We're actually going to have no lessons this week. It's just going to be Monday and Wednesday, me doing practice problems. The test is due Thursday at 11:59. And then Friday, the quote-unquote class, the time that would be 2:30 to 3, is going to be me going over some of the problems off the test. Alright, so again, this is just practice problems. There is no new material in here. I'm just going to be looking at some practice problems and walking us through them. Alright. Fantastic. So, if we look at this question, right, the first one that I've pulled up here, which statement best describes what is most likely to occur if an animal population grows larger than the carrying capacity of its environment? Right, keywords here we got. This will still be posted on the channel, and it will be in the ecology playlist. So it'll be there for you to go back and watch 100%. Population grows larger than the carrying capacity. Right, if it's above, right, there's more animals than the population, than the environment, sorry. You can hold. Right, we want something that is going to align with this, right? If there's already more than the environment can hold, they're not going to have more being born. We already said the birth rate will not increase. Oh, sorry, never mind. I misread that. Both the birth rate and the death rate will decrease. They're going to be born less and they're going to die less. If there's more than the environment can hold, they're not going to die less, so that makes this answer wrong. The death rate will increase. This is the right answer here. There's more than the environment can hold, which means some of these animals need to die out in order for the environment to readjust itself, right? In order for the ecosystem to remain balanced. And then saying that nothing will decrease is not true, because the birth rate will decrease. There's going to be less being born and more dying to go, right? We're above the line. We're here. We have to get ourselves back down towards this line, which means less birth and more death. Which is macabre, but that's kind of the way it works, right? The environment can only support this many. If we've got more than we can support, we have to bring it down. Right. Taking a look at our second practice problem. Due to overfishing, the number of fish in the ocean could drastically decrease. This will cause blank. Alright, so overfishing is going to be a human impact on the environment. We're going to talk about how that's going to affect the stability, salt content, and oxygen. Right, so if there's less fish, we have to see which one of these things is true. An increase in the stability of the oceans. If there's less of one kind of organism, is going to lead to a decrease in stability, not an increase. So that is incorrect, so it's not going to be A. an increase in the salt content of oceans. Fish don't really contribute to the salt content of an ocean, right? The ocean is salty. If you take all the fish out of the ocean, that doesn't make it not salty anymore. So that's just not a relatable answer. A decrease in the stability of oceans is going to be our correct choice here, right? Less fish is going to lead to a decrease in stability. Remember, taking something out of the complex food web that exists in the oceans, right? I'm not actually going to write anything in here, but the food web of the ocean, if you remove a piece, it impacts a bunch of other things, and that's going to lead to a decrease in stability, right? So less biodiversity. A decrease in the oxygen available. If there's less fish, there would actually be more oxygen in the oceans because there's less things using the oxygen. So D is going to be incorrect as well. All right. Questions, comments, or concerns there? All right, moving on. Looking at a third practice problem. For a producer to maintain itself, which factor must be present in its environment? This is a vocab question, right? If we're looking at a producer, we're looking at an autotroph. We're looking at something that makes its own food. Right, something that makes its own food is going to be a plant or some sort of bacteria. Right, most likely a plant. All right, doing photosynthesis. So if we want photosynthesis to happen, only one of these things needs to be present. If we want photosynthesis to be happening, we need sunlight. Questions, comments, concerns here? It would be wrong to say carnivores even if they give plants CO2. Yes, because without sunlight, the photosynthesis actually just can't happen, even if the carnivores are there, even if the herbivores are there, right? Both of these things are going to provide CO2, but having CO2 without sunlight is going to just not allow photosynthesis to happen. Plants can grow in places where there are no carnivores or herbivores, right? There's no living things because the air itself is full of carbon dioxide. They don't need a source of carbon dioxide unless they're like a plant trapped in like a glass cage, right? If the plant is secluded in something that's airtight, then you would need some sort of animal in here that could give it the CO2 it needs. But out in the open, it doesn't need a provider of CO2 because the air has so much in it. Right. Taking a look at our fourth practice problem. An ecological process is represented below, and we have slowly a forest growing of grassland. Somebody was asking me about time frame for ecological succession, and see, we have a time frame here of 300 years. So it's a course of many decades before one changes to the next. Which statement describes an event in this process? Community B modifies the environment, making it suitable for Community C. Seems to be a good answer. We'll give that a check. Community D modifies the environment, making it suitable for Community C. So it's not going to go backwards, so it's not going to be B. Community E will develop into Community A, right? They're saying it's a cycle. If the environment remains stable, that's not necessarily true, right? We don't know for a fact that every forest becomes grassland, so we can't say that. So it's not going to be C. Community A organisms will develop directly into Community D organisms. We know that that's not true because we look at this diagram and it goes from A to B to C to D. It doesn't just skip. Right? So it's not a direct connection from A to D, it's a multi-step connection from A to D. All right, making A our first answer, our best answer, our only answer. All right, remember when we talked about ecological succession, we talked about how each of the steps helps prepare for the next step. Questions, comments, or concerns here? All right, moving on to look at our next practice problem. Respiration and photosynthesis have the least effect on the cycling of blank. Respiration and photosynthesis. Respiration is taking oxygen and making CO2. Photosynthesis is taking CO2 and making oxygen. Right? Both of these things have water as a byproduct. So if we're looking at now which thing here is not included, right? Carbon is a part of this cycle. Oxygen is a big part of this cycle. Hydrogen is a part of this cycle. But nitrogen is nowhere to be found here, right? Breathing in and out, right? Respiration and photosynthesis have no effect on the cycling of nitrogen. Moving on to our next one, if we look at question number 6. A relationship between a consumer and a producer is best illustrated by a snake eating a bird, a tree absorbing minerals, a fungus breaking down waste, a deer eating grass. Right, so we have 4 relationships here. We're looking for a consumer and a producer. Right, before we talked about a producer and how that is an autotroph. Alright, something that makes its own food. Something that is most likely a plant. So that means one of our two things in each of these examples has to be a plant. Snake eating a bird, neither one of those is plants, so it's definitely not going to be A. Tree absorbing minerals, tree is a producer, so that could maybe be an answer. Fungus breaking down wastes, fungus is not really it's not actually a plant. So fungus is not going to be the answer here. A deer eating grass, grass is a plant, right? So we have a producer here, we have a producer here. A consumer would be something that eating something else. Right, so we don't know if that's a carnivore or an herbivore based on just the word consumer, but consumer would be an animal eating something else, right? Either another animal or a plant. Minerals are not a consumer, so that's going to make B not the correct choice, but a deer is a consumer, right? The deer eating the grass would be a consumer eating a producer. Right, lots of vocab and connections between these vocab words. Questions, comments, or concerns here? Alright, moving on to our next practice problem. The chart below shows a sequence of events that was observed at an abandoned ski center over a period of years. We see that in 1985, the dominant plant was grass. In 1995, 10 years later, it was shrubs and bushes. In 2005, another 10 years later, it was cherry, birch, and poplar trees. The sequence of changes is the result of, right, as we go from grasses to bushes to trees. That is the definition, or not the actual definition, but this is a very good example of ecological succession. Right, and we talked about this, right? Abandoned ski center. Right, we talked about how humans are going to come along. They're going to clear out an area and reduce the biodiversity by a lot, and then over time, nature will rebound and grow back the trees that were once there, the grasses that were once there, the bushes that were once there. Right, it will reclaim itself and biodiversitize. Right, it'll go back to being some other ecosystem. It'll rebuild an ecosystem. Right, decreased biodiversity is what caused us to have only grasses. Right, so it's not going to then result here. Environmental trade-offs doesn't have anything to do with this. Biological evolution, right? The grass did not evolve into shrubs and bushes. The shrubs and bushes did not evolve into trees. So it's not at all evolution. It's not about decreasing the biodiversity. It's not about the environment. It's ecological succession. It's slowly going from one type of dominant organism to another until you have rebuilt an ecosystem. Taking a look at our 8th practice problem. Researchers have discovered a chemical that sterilizes soil by killing all of the bacteria that are normally present. If this chemical were released in a forest ecosystem, the most likely result would be. So they're saying killing all the bacteria in a forest. Right. The food web would be disrupted because there would be little recycling of nutrients. Fewer animals would suffer from diseases such as cancer. There would be more energy available for insects and worms that live in the soil. The diversity would increase. Right. first. Taking out something from a ecosystem is never going to increase diversity. Fewer animals would suffer from diseases such as cancer. Bacteria do not cause cancer, so it's not going to be B. There would be more energy available for insects and worms that live in the soil. Bacteria actually provide those nutrients and that energy, so that's not going to be C, right? There would actually be less. The food web would be disrupted because there would be little recycling of nutrients. This is our answer here. Bacteria are decomposers. So without them to break down wastes and reintroduce nutrients into the ecosystem, there's going to be little recycling of nutrients. We're going to interrupt that food web because now there are going to be less plants because they're getting less nutrients. And because of the less plants, there will be less herbivores because there are less plants, right? And everything domino effect down the line would be reduced. Right, moving on, looking at question number 9. Decomposers are necessary in a food chain because they return nutrients to the ecosystem. Right, when we're talking about decomposers, just like in our previous problem, right, sometimes they're asking you straight up what's the definition of the word decomposer. Other times they're asking you a little bit more tricky, right, with that longer paragraph asking you to analyze. Right, but there are a lot of vocab words in this unit. Decomposers are necessary because they manufacture food from photosynthesis. That's not true. That would be a producer, not a decomposer. Absorb energy from the sun. Again, not a decomposer. That would be a producer. Produce organic nutrients. That could be anything. Right? If we're talking about producing nutrients, that could be a producer. That could be a consumer. That could be a decomposer. Right? By being alive, decomposer. By being alive, you are producing organic nutrients, right? Anything that is alive that is manufacturing its own proteins or manufacturing its own fats or manufacturing its own carbohydrates, those are all producing organic nutrients. So decomposers aren't necessary because they do that, because everything does that. The thing that decomposers do that nothing else does is returning nutrients to the ecosystem, right? They are a huge part of the recycling of nitrogen. Decomposer. Let's try that again. Alright, moving on to take a look at our 10th practice problem. Which would be the most likely effect of a drastic reduction in all of the producer organisms in a meadow environment? Alright, that means we're going to lose producers. So if we lose producers, I can spell, I swear I can. So if we lose our producers, the grasshoppers would multiply rapidly. This is definitely not true. Right? Grasshoppers need to eat grasses and plants, so they're not going to reproduce, they're actually going to die out. So this, not true. The rabbit population would decrease. By losing its food source, by losing its grass and leaves, the rabbits have nothing to eat, their population would decrease. That looks pretty true. Right? Let's check our other answers just to make sure. All of the snake populations would increase. Now, snakes don't directly eat the producers, right? You're not going to watch a snake nibble on some grass. But the snake has to eat rabbits, it has to eat grasshoppers, it has to eat other things that have eaten the grass. Right? When we talk about the biomass pyramid, right, when we talk about producers on the bottom, herbivores here, and carnivores here, if the producers are decreasing, that means the herbivores are decreasing. That means the carnivores are decreasing. So the snakes are not going to increase. They are going to decrease. All of the decomposers would die. What an insanely final statement, right? All the decomposers would die, and they're not saying it's going to decrease. Right here they're saying multiply rapidly, increase, decrease. They're just saying all of these decomposers would die out. That's not true, right? Decomposers thrive off of the bodies of dead things, right? So if the producers are dying, right? If we're losing producers, then we're losing herbivores and we're losing carnivores. The decomposers are going to feast, right? They're going to eat all of these remains. So it's not that they're going to die. They're not going to die. They're going to have plenty of food sources, right? Which brings us back up top to B. The rabbit population would decrease. Our best answer, our only answer. All right, and as a closing note, say for the questions that are generally going to be similar, or are we going to see some of these on the test? Honestly, it could be either or. I'm going to do practice problems with you again, just like I did today on Wednesday. Some of them are going to be very similar to stuff that you'll see on the test. Some of them are going to be straight off of the homework, right? There are a lot of overlap because there's only so many good questions to ask about this topic. Right? So these are questions that I took off of Test Wizard, the same place that I make your homework, the same place that I make your tests. So there's a good chance that there's some overlap. Tomorrow, there's not going to be a lesson. I'm going to just have office hours, and it'll be from 1:30 to 2, so it'll be earlier than you're used to. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, come to office hours, ask them. I'll go over concepts. I'll do a practice problem if you have something you're confused about, etc. But most of you, I will see you on Wednesday, when we're going to do another set of practice problems, continuing off of these 10 here. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you all Wednesday.